juxtaposes the historic with the present as it considers different degrees of brutality. Next slide. More recently, in fact, right now, Rashid created the changing backdrop for a spectacular London dance performance. He collaborated with renowned choreographers from the Royal Opera House in London and leading innovators there in lighting, composition, and projection for this production. Rashid's grid, a staple in his 2- and 3-dimensional compositions, which you've probably already noticed, functions as a unifying element in the background of this production. The immense undertaking features a selection of his diverse repertoire projected onto the stage. Next one. Okay. Like Rashid Rana, Shazia Sikandar works with diverse media. However, she came to her present art practice from a different type of training. Her degree is in miniature painting from the National College of Arts, and it indelibly shaped her philosophical and technical approach to art. Shazia makes videos, works with digital imagery, she makes installations and murals, but she still paints on handmade vasli. And if there's any foreigners in here, they may not know what that is, but I know all of you do. And she still employs themes and techniques of traditional miniature painting. Her 1988 painting of the Simurgh, on the right, is in Persian style. And that Shazia, even as a student, had the skill of a master technician, is obvious in this work. Next slide. The black and white painting on the left reflects the influence of her teacher, Bashir Ahmed, and his famous graphite paintings. It mimics a page from an Islamic manuscript, but it is abstract and it's charmingly playful if you look at it carefully. Shazia's ability to manipulate traditional techniques of miniature painting continues to underscore her diverse output. Ascent Descent, on the other side, is a large work in which the painted and drawn motifs, which I do not need to explain to you because I'm sure that you figure you are familiar with all of those images are superimposed over a digitized sheet of Shazia's hand-rendered calligraphy. And this is very similar to the work that she had in the Kansas City exhibition. The next slide, next images, please. Eyeing those armorial bearings on your left pays tribute to one of Shazia's closest friends, celebrated Texas artist and entrepreneur, Rick Lowe. Look him up too on the internet. He's a very interesting artist. This work exemplifies Shazia's artistic evolution. It's challenging herself by painting over one of her meticulously rendered miniature paintings. I think you can see that there was a miniature painting underneath that she just, in a sense, destroyed by painting wildly over it. Rick's inverted portrait dominates the composition. It's filled with symbols signifying Shazia's life-changing events from the time that she was in the NCA, and you can pick out some of those, to her time at RISD, her residency in Texas where she met Rick Lowe, 2 years, her success in the 1997 Whitney Biennale, which brought her into world recognition, and then finally her move to New York City, where she now resides, when she's not traveling around the world doing exhibitions. The banner on the other side It was commissioned by the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it signaled her status in the art world. It pairs a Renaissance period painter, Agnolo Bronzino, from his allegory Venus and Cupid, with a medieval period Hindu temple figure. The erotic interaction between those two figures mocks the fraught British-Indian relationship during the colonial period. Eventually, however, as we know, Europeans who visited and settled in India acquired a deep appreciation for the art and for the culture. Bronzino's Venus, in fact, appears to be adoring the Hindu temple figure. Next one. Spin is a complex video animation. Of course, this is just a small part of it, a still from that. Brings hundreds of gopis, and I think you all know those are Krishna's girlfriends, onto the Maharaja's Jaroka. Gopi's hair, one of Shazia's favorite icons, detached from so many gopi heads, swarms together to hide the emperor on the far right. The title that she gave it, Spin, is a pun on the TV news station CNN. And the conclusion of her video is that feminine energy may have its day of dominance. In 2015, another Shazia video was selected to be featured on huge screens at midnight in Times Square, New York City for 1 month. That's on the bottom. I think you can pick out Shazia's video. Shazia was given the Macarthur Genius Award in 2011. That's a huge $50,000 award, just like here. Go do whatever you want to with it. She received the Asia Society Award for Art, and also from the United States Department of State, she got their Medal of Art. Shazia and I reconnected in Kansas City at that Islamic exhibition where her work was featured along with the work of Rashid Rana, Bashir Ahmed, and Hamra Abbas. Next slide, please. Image. Bashir Ahmed, I know that all of you know who this is, was the only student seriously interested in learning the skills and the subject matter of miniature painting in the 1960s and 70s from Haji Sharif and Sheikh Shuja'ullah. He underwent an 8-year apprenticeship with those aging ustads. After Bashir mastered the skills, he began reinventing traditional styles of miniature painting and the techniques and the subject matter. And on his graduation from the NCA, he was hired to teach at the NCA. Bashir then created a curriculum. There was no curriculum before that for the degree program in miniature painting. There are many styles in miniature painting, as you know, Bahari, Rajput, Persian, Mughal, Persian sort of influencing the Mughal, or part of the basis of it. And he mastered them all. And in doing that, he created a renaissance in this genre. Mumtaz Mahal, his painting in his student years on the right, in Mughal style, exemplifies Bashir's skill in inventing borders to frame the oval and to convincingly render the queen's features. He did this, as I said, while he was still a student. Next one. Right. On the left, the pristine painting of a Mughal soldier could pass easily for a 17th century original, except that the soldier has a halo not really very common in Mughal painting. And the face is that, as you might well recognize, of his colleague, painter Sayyid Akhtar. The striated, striped cloud design at the top is a contemporary innovation by Bashir. You won't find something like that in Mughal painting. And Bashir's reformation of Mughal miniature painting, or miniature painting in general, was less dramatic than that of Shazia or that of Imran Qureshi, whose work we'll look at next. But he is absolutely no less important, because without Bashir, there would be no contemporary miniature painting movement. The very bad image, I apologize for the fuzzy image on the right of the princess receiving bangles. I asked Bashir to send me a better image, and he changed his email and forgot to tell me. So he never received the message. Was featured in the first American exhibition ever of art from Pakistan that, in fact, Jamal mentioned, and his work was there too, and there is a catalog from that exhibition. That was at the Pacific Asia Museum in Pasadena, California. His iconic cloud band, ever evolving, becomes a decorative element in subsequent paintings. While the figure and the face and the clothing of the ladies and the princess comes from Pahari painting, the general layout, the composition of the painting departs from tradition. So these are ways that Bashir Ahmed is modernizing or contemporizing miniature. And this is something that I think is overlooked, but needs to be brought to everybody's attention, his important contribution. His graphite paintings, next slide, like this one, this diptych of a Persian poet and his Saki are another of Bashir's inventions. While monochromatic ink paintings were done in Persia, and they were done in Mughal India, none of them were done large. And none of them were ever completely done in graphite. So Bashir has invented this new kind of form of miniature, I don't know if you can call it miniature, of painting derived from miniature. The image on the right, he abstracted his narrative to create a message and to further contemporize the tradition. That painting entitled Overtake is an example in which the three sons of Shah Jahan are riding through a desert. It comes from a famous painting in the Victoria and Albert Museum, a famous Mughal painting. But his painting, the figures are partially hidden by a fog. The fog stretches across the border. There's a conscious effort on Bashir's part to confuse the spatial clarity and to give an antique feeling to the work. The full moon is another one of Bashir's favorite symbols, icons, and he told me that it represents hope. Well, if that's true, if his hope was to save and to reconstitute miniature painting, then he has been successful. Next one. Sayyid Akhtar is among the most accomplished portrait painters in Pakistan. He graduated from the PNCA and he joined the faculty right after graduation. One of his favorite themes is himself as a Baluch tribalman. With yards of cloth making up a voluminous turban, Sayyid was raised in Quetta, and so he can rightly identify with the rugged tribesmen that he portrays. Next one. His pastel depiction of poet and political activist, who you all know, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, is one of the many portraits that he's done, many portraits of important Pakistani intellectuals, statesmen, and eccentrics. The rendering of Qaid-e-Azam is classic. In fact, I think that's the same one that's outside the building when we came in. It inspires respect, as it should, for the first Governor General of the new Republic of Pakistan. This image is one of 27 stamps that was commissioned by the government. Next slide, next image. Upon Bashir's retirement in 2014 from the National College of Arts, Imran Qureshi became the primary ustad of miniature painting at the NCA. This seems an unlikely fit because, as you may know, much of his work is very abstract and uncontained, without borders. It's often very large, and it's expressed as either video or with other media than the traditional miniature painting, water-based media. Nevertheless, he teaches the process and the skills required to produce a traditional miniature painting. Qureshi, in fact, was hoping maybe he'd come, but I think he's in New York right now, receiving the same award that Shazia was awarded some years ago, the Medal of Art from the State Department. In this photo, Imran is attaching gold leaf to the surface of a slate, so that it will look like the sky in the landscape painting on the other side. The blood red fountain in the middle, bubbling up in that forest, suggests a contrast between man-made violence and natural beauty, a theme that he has pursued for quite some time now. Qureshi's roots as a miniature painter, a graduate of Bashir Ahmed's program at the NCA, is evident in his work. Even though much of it is abstract, and it seems very different from traditional Mughal era painting, these trees that derived from Rajput painting, here in this particular painting, are from the Punjab Hills. And they occur over and over in his work. More often, they are minimalized as leaves, outlined very carefully, or as clusters of leaves. Next one. Qureshi's fascination with foliage, with those leaves and trees, each leaf very carefully rendered, outlined, formed separately or in clusters, functions as a backdrop, in this case, for this painting entitled Target. Duality, once again, a popular theme with Pakistani artists, is at play here. This is a theme also that Qureshi has used throughout his work. The human weakness, susceptibility to cause harm, is countered by the constancy of nature. The very abstract blue oval shape on the other side, the untitled work, seems to depart completely from the usual characteristics of miniature painting. But it is covered with delicately rendered leaves, like those in the Target, and small pieces of camouflage, which float about the painting. So if you look carefully, I think you can make that out. Now, if you've been following Imran's work, you know that he very often painted himself wearing camouflage, or he put the camouflage in other paintings. So this sort of tells you what an art historian does. An art historian has to look not only at the current work, but back to see how an artist evolves to understand what's going on. So, because one of my friends, I read this to one of my friends, art history friends, and she said, I don't understand that painting at all. It doesn't look like a miniature painting. And what are all those little green things floating around? But she hadn't seen other work of Imran Qureshi. She hadn't seen his previous work. So just an example of what you do as an art historian. Like Rashid Rana and Shazia Sikandar, Qureshi took his skills to work on a larger scale, in installations, in video, and in 2014, let's go to the next slide, the next image. He was invited to paint the rooftop at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Since then, he's done other similar large-scale commissions in Europe, and one in Singapore, and the one in Singapore was similar, but he used blue instead of this blood red. Again, that idea of violence against nature, countering the sort of quiet and peacefulness of nature. This huge installation on the right at Kunsthal in Berlin in 2013 coincided with Qureshi being named Artist of the Year by Deutsche Bank. Next slide, image. I first met Hamra Abbas when she was an undergraduate at the NCA. She was in the MFA program a few years later when I was there writing the program for the art history part of the curriculum. And since then, she's earned a considerable reputation as an adventuresome artist who works in diverse media and styles. Her work was included also at the Nelson Atkins Museum exhibition, where I became reacquainted with her art and her oeuvre. Her her paper plates greeted the visitors as they entered the gallery. Hamra had taken thin strips of paper with "Please be served" printed on each one and glued them into the design of plates or cups, stiffened them, and put them on display there. There again is a duality. The designs from traditional Islamic patterns, you can see the designs come from traditional Islamic patterns, and of course the exhibition was trying to tie tradition, contemporary and tradition together. And they purport to be serviceware, stoneware, or ceramic, but they are too fragile to function as ceramic ware that they pretend to be, that they emulate. Here again is that duality. Hamra's, next slide. Burak was featured in Hanging Fire. That was an exhibition that was created by Salima Hashmi for the Asia Society in New York in 2006. Hamra's Burak stands alone without Muhammad on its back. I doubt that the human-headed winged horse has ever previously been conceived of as completely red and riderless. I could be wrong. Her sculpture entitled "Cut the Sikhs Hair" seemingly refers to the dilemma confronting Sikhs who settled in foreign countries and then they stand out among the Westerners and even among South Asians owing to their turbans covering their long hair. It could refer to the potential assault on Sikhs as well, perhaps during partition or even in foreign countries. As you see, one arm appears to be holding back the assault by the defensive arm. Next slide. Whoops, did I skip one? So, okay, sorry. I should be watching what's going on here. Back up. Next one. I forgot that I put that extra slide in there. There was a time, not too long ago, when only a few Pakistani artists were making sculpture. Our next artist, Adila Solomon, was born in Karachi and graduated from the Indus Valley School of Art. She specializes in sculpture and works primarily with metals. Adila's headwear, like these, are made from everyday kitchen utensils, as you can see, metal cooking pots, water cans, spoons, forks, whatever you would find in a kitchen. Of course, she's making a statement about women's role within the family composition. This would apply to most societies and most countries, not just to Pakistan. But there's more going on here. The headpieces, some even look like crowns, are beautiful and they're imaginative, but they could also cage a woman, particularly this one on the left. They are hard and unyielding on the head. One art critic wrote that Adila is engaged with political concerns, as well as gender and societal issues. The light blue-green helmet on the right gives the impression of being derived from Indian female temple figures. Two more, the next slide, or the next image, of Adila's metal headpieces are so unique and unusual that they can stand alone, like the one on the left, as a sculpture, as an independent sculptor. Michelle, my art history friend that I was talking about earlier, who edits my writing, and then I edit hers, so we do this kind of nice cooperation thing because she publishes in a different field. She publishes in Renaissance art. She said that she thought that sculpture looked like a Japanese shogun helmet. So I said I would say that in my lecture. Feroza, the other headpiece, is an abstracted peacock. I think you can make that out, where the tail is obscuring Adila's identity. Why is that? Well, other pieces haven't obscured her identity. They just sat on her head, but this one does. It represents several interpretations. It obscures her identity to highlight the peacock, the male peacock tail display. And also probably connecting it with Krishna, because Krishna is always shown with a peacock feather in his head, and it is his identity. But I think there are other interpretations, and you might have your own personal interpretation of what's going on here. Next one. More recently, she's been creating narratives, relief narratives, like the tree, clouds, and birds, and these are all from stainless steel. The arrangement on the left was commissioned by the Royal London Hospital, and that's where it's located. On the right, there's an intricate metal wall decoration that was exhibited in her solo show at the Icon Gallery in New York. The craftsmanship is exquisite, and it highlights Adila's diversibility as an artist. Next one. Most artists from Pakistani artists, use trees, plants, flowers, nature, or people, or animals as a basis for their art. And most look at Pakistan's artistic past or to Western art for their reference, for their influence, for their background. But there's one artist that I know of that is an exception, and that is Sabah Hussain, who studied at the NCA, and then she went to Japan. She received her master's in art, in printmaking from Kyoto University, and it's not surprising then that her art has a very Japanese feel to it. Her drawings and her constructions, and even though her style and her painting is abstract, the themes do come from a Pakistani background, from her, of course, background, from her love of classical Indian and Pakistani music and poetry, particularly from Rumi, from Fez Ahmed Fez, and from the Persian poets. And more recently, she's been inspired. She did a whole series inspired by the 20th century artist Noon Meme Rashid. Actually, I think he's 19th century. In the photo on the left, okay, that's Sabah talking with, you may recognize, the Pakistan ambassador to the USA at her recent exhibition in Washington, D.C. On the other side, the diptych, no, not yet. The painting on the other side of the screen is an abstract work that derives from her influence from Rashid, Noon Meme Rashid, from the poet, which to me looks like a sheet of music. Next slide. The diptych on the left, yes. It looks like it's reversed, but it's meant to be an intentional mirror image with the calligraphy. Incorporates gold sheets that are embedded into Sabah's handmade paper from various rare Japanese plant fibers. Kozo, she told me, Mitsumata, I don't know if any of you are familiar with any of this, and even from bamboo. So Sabah studied paper making in Tokyo. She also studied in Kyoto, and that's her specialty. So this type of handmade paper, I think, is what she is best known for. And while the works look sort of Far Eastern, there is an incorporation of Arabic script, which ties the Japanese style into her own background. To me, it is reminiscent of Islamic manuscripts, the composition of her work. The Baghdad Manuscript, which is the one on the right, part of a series. These were some that were shown in Washington, D.C., where she incorporates handmade paper, printmaking that she studied in Kyoto, Japan, calligraphy, stamps, handmade stamps that she makes, and the free brushwork, which is so typical of the Japanese and Chinese artists, sumi painting. The Baghdad manuscripts were inspired by a poem called Hasan Kuzagar by Rashid, the poet Rashid that I just mentioned. For me, these paintings look very Zen. I finally got Sabah to agree. It is earthy. Her paintings are earthy, and they're deceivingly spontaneous. But the juxtaposition of the imagery, the inclusion, the repetition of the calligraphy, that all creates the context. Next one. Yes. The one on the right is, on the left, is a very early work by her, Sabah, in fact, one that she did when she was in Japan. The brush strokes, okay, let's try it again. The brush strokes are expressive and liberating. Just as the artist, to me, I see Zen, because in Zen, the artist is seeking nirvana. He's seeking liberation. So the work has to be very fast and very liberating, and I see that in Sabah's work. Liberating, the ultimate goal is to be liberated from the cycles of life. I'm not sure that Sabah was thinking about that. She's pretty young. She's not ready yet. The work on the right is more contained, so it's a little bit later. Again, you need to look at artists, how they evolve, how they come to their eventual maturity. Her work, too, is concerned with layers of material, with process. and with conscious design. So there are a lot of messages going on. We've talked about what Imran Qureshi is telling us, what Rashid's work tells us. But let's face it, artists are also interested in the way that the work, how they put it together, how they make it, and the composition, what all of the parts of it relate to each other. It's not only the message. So everything works in tandem. I think that Saba's work is quite unique in Pakistan because she studied in Japan and because she's so concerned with printmaking and with textures and with material. Two more examples. Next one, I think. Oh, no, okay. If Saba's work is unusual for her Far Eastern style of painting and her papermaking, and her very quiet, rather understated presentation, the paintings and the digital prints of Anwar Said are just the opposite. Said graduated from the NCA in 1978. He attended the Royal College of Art in London, and he taught at the NCA for 30 years. He retired recently. We often crossed paths when I was at the NCA, and I was there often, but we never really sat down and talked seriously about his work. I regret that because I intend to do that now. His paintings feature men, generally muscular, stocky, like those that you see in these paintings. Said's work explores the nature of being gay in societies that are not yet acceptive of same gender liaisons. This painting suggests the one, yeah, so that's Said Anwar, and then the painting suggests that the two smiling men whose bodies reflect the light have found one another, and they're enjoying a satisfying and open relationship. The fellow in the shadow alone must have gratification vicariously by phone. He is, so to speak, in the dark. You might say perhaps not out of the closet. It's a lonely existence. Next slide. There's a similar sense of understanding for the painting entitled Other Ways of Love. Said said that his themes are about love and pleasure and decadence, but they're also about challenging the norms of society. Some of his paintings seek to mock those who act as a moral compass for society. The protests, in fact, day before yesterday in Lahore, we were stopped on the highway because of the protests against Salman Taseer debacle, which I'm sure you are all aware of. And I think there's evidence of a lack of understanding, of openness. But by the same token, I think that this is changing everywhere in the world, and in Pakistan as well. Many of Said Anwar's paintings use green, as you probably have already noticed. This probably has a special meaning for Said, and of course green is a powerful color of Islam. But for me, when I look at these paintings, I don't see the fresh green of spring or of trees or plants. But what I see is a green that is a dreary, kind of sad, a dull green that puts the figures into a monochromatic environment. In other words, a lack of opportunity to interact in a more diverse environment. In the next slide. A book of imaginary companions breaks the green scheme, however, with bright, contrasting colors. They're just in your face. It's no longer monochromatic. It's not subtle. These are intended to provoke the viewer. In Indian miniature painting, tree trunks act as the lingam. For the eager Nayaka, the Nayaka being the female who is seeking her lover, So the Nayak, I'm sure you think of Rajput and Pahari miniature painting, who climbs up the tree trunk, clings to it in a very erotic endeavor. Here, the red branches in this painting seem to grab the complacent fellow who watches his companion suggestively, who is hugging a fish. Only Said can give us his personal interpretation here, but once again, I think everything is fairly obvious. Yes. Exhibiting nude women a few years ago, as you all well know, was not acceptable, and I don't know how acceptable it is even today to have blatant nudes in exhibitions. It could be very dangerous 10 years ago. It's refreshing to know that painting outside the norm, such as Said has done here, indicates a more sophisticated and a more tolerant Pakistan society. His digital prints, like those on your left, entitled Exercises in Imagining the Other, are dramas that entice the imagination in a provocative encounter, like the ones on the top tier. And then on the bottom, in a more down-to-earth human encounter, person to person, with the identity hidden so that there can be a more honest discussion about such personal situations. The next one. This is my last artist that I'm going to talk about, Ruby Chisti. I met her at the NCA in 2000. She graduated in 1988, but then she disappeared from the art scene. Everybody was concerned. She disappeared to care for an ailing mother for 11 years. Her mother died in 2001. Now she resides in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband, who's also an artist. Ruby's work is, as you can see, three-dimensional, and it's unusual as well because of her materials. She uses found materials, discarded clothes, substances from nature, such as twigs, branches, and is unique, I think, among Pakistani artists. The 5 women seated on the ground in the circle are quite adorable, but they look sad, with their arms covering their faces and their heads bent in despair. Ruby told Lahore writer Qudus Mirza that her grandmother had predicted that her mother would give birth to a boy. When Ruby was born, and the prediction proved wrong, her parents were greatly disappointed, and I think we can all identify with that as well. That happens more often than just with Ruby. Ruby was aware of her parents' disappointment as a child, she said, on every Ramadan, she prayed to become a boy. Eventually, she realized the futility of this wish, and then she made peace with herself. So my birth will take place 1,000 times, no matter how you celebrate it, on the right, represents Ruby's personal trial and coming to terms with her gender as a female and living with ease, at ease within her family. Next slide. I think that this was here in the PNCA. It may still be here, and if it is, I'd really like to see it. Like 5 women that we just looked at, the sketch of a fading memory is autobiographical. Ruby told the curator, Nadaraza, that she was the primary caregiver, as we know, during her mother's very long illness. The Christian concept, the image of Madonna and child, comes to mind for Westerners when they look at this. But it's reversed. It's not the Madonna with the Christ child. It's a mother and daughter But that is even reversed, because it is the child caring for the parent, not the parent caring for the child. So she chose twigs to weave into the sculpture to make the narrative. And twigs are the dendritus of nature. The twigs are fragile and they're fragmented, like her mother's physical condition was, and like Ruby's emotional condition. The crows are essential to the narrative as well. They gather twigs for their nest, a maternal activity that Ruby identified with, and still does. The two crows, flanking the mother and the child, stand in for cherubs that are often seen in medieval paintings of the Madonna and the Christ. They also symbolize the ability to survive in harsh conditions, and life has been difficult for Ruby. But now she flourishes. Considering, let's see the last slide, the last image. Yes. Considering what you know from what I've said about Ruby and her history and her painting, her sculptures, you might take a minute and try to give your own interpretation to the work entitled Free Hugs, and the other work on the other side entitled Cessation. I'm not going to give you any hints. Keep in mind that our personal reaction to art, to artwork, is often quite different from what the artist had intended. I look forward to learning more about these artists, these works, their new works, and the great work in this presentation, the wonderful art that you've seen, is just an overview of a few artists that are out there working and in the world, in other countries, as well as here in Pakistan. And there are so many that still have to be found, so many that are already found. This is the reason that I study about Pakistani art, also Indian art as well. But right now, Pakistan in particular, because the art here is so vibrant and it's so filled with promise, that every day is like an exciting research assignment for me. And with that, I thank you very much for your kind attention and for coming, and I hope to meet as many of you as possible. Thank you. If you have questions, I would ask you to answer or comments. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, that's better. Now we can see each other. Did you have any interpretations for free hugs? Let me ask you. What do you think free hugs refer to? Anybody want to make a venture guess? What about cessation? Oh, come on. Where are you all coming from? Are some of you from Jamal's institution? From his school? What about NCA? Oh yeah, we need a microphone. Hard to hear.
I had joined NCA. I was in the first batch of the MA Visual Arts, but I quit. I know all of these students, Ruby, Chishti, and Hamra were in my batch. So I can understand Ruby's work. I think the hugs were really something. She was probably didn't get that attachment, that kind of closeness from her family. And the cessation, I feel she's talking about women being treated as milking cows, this is how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really nice to know. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add that you've met, some of the artists, or some artists that you'd like to mention that you think should be included in the next presentation like this? Did you follow everything okay? Okay. Well, if there's no questions, then I don't need to stand here. Yep, heading back to Lahore. Can anybody give a suggestion? What did you think about the free hugs? How would you interpret that?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm from Lahore NCA National College of Arts और मैंने मल्टीमीडिया आर्ट्स में मास्टर्स किया है और आई थिंक आपने खलील चिश्ती को मेंशन नहीं किया खलील चिश्ती मतलब उनका काम भी बहुत ज़्यादा एडमायरेबल है और आरएम नईम और बाकी आपने जो भी प्रेजेंटेशन दी वो बहुत इंफॉर्मेटिव थी स्टूडेंट्स के लिए और मैं इन आर्टिस्ट को ऑलरेडी जानती थी और जो आपने इंडस वैली के एक आर्टिस्ट आई थिंक सारा नाम था उनका जिनके स्कल्पचर्स थे अदीला वो एक मतलब न्यू इन्फॉर्मेशन थी फॉर मी एंड थैंक यू सो मच
Marcella, this was super, honestly, very informative, very educational, and we are thrilled. We don't get to hear the way you have illustrative all these artists. We would like to see you more frequently on this stage so that you can interact more with these art students, art teachers, and this is indeed a rare opportunity. Thank you. Give her a big hand. Thank you for being with us, and we have little refreshments for you. Thank you. Okay, now there has to be a group photo. Without that, we can't leave Marcella to go out. Marcella, you have to come up, along with, all those who are here, who can fit in onto this stage, please.